It's Thursday. It's the start of week 9. It's the day before Halloween. A lot of fun stuff going on. Hopefully your fantasy lineups are having fun as well. I know we're having a good time setting our lineups, talking about some of our matchups for week 9. Heath and I are playing each other in like 25 leagues this week, so should be a lot of fun. Again, this Fantasy Football Today presented by BetMGM. Make it legendary. I'm Jamie Eisenberg. That's Dave Richard. That's Heath Cummings. Going to go through our rankings for week number 9, get those lineups set for you. Again, we've got a game on Thursday night between the Ravens and the Dolphins. And guess who's back? It's Lamar Jackson. So let's show you those quarterback rankings, 1 through 12, and get you the guys that you need to be in your lineups. Remember, there are 4 teams on a bye. 2 prominent quarterbacks will be off this week, at least 2, with Baker Mayfield and Jalen Hurts. No Justin Fields. He was playing well last week. We'll see if that continues coming off the bye. And, of course, no Dylan Gabriel. Everybody is very sad that Dylan Gabriel is not playing. So we got Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson at the top. Heath, I know you got Justin Herbert. I believe when we discussed this morning, you got him number 2. Any concern with Lamar Jackson, though, for either of you guys? Coming back after the 3-game layoff now, we know we thought he was going to come back after the bye week, but he's facing the Dolphins. He tends to own the Dolphins. I think it's Stephen Ross and Lamar Jackson. Those are the co-owners of the Miami Dolphins. But in any event, any concern with Lamar Jackson this week?
I don't have any. I think that he's going to be able to come back, and I think the Ravens will be able to establish their dominance on offense against this team. Their defense looked a lot better against the Falcons than they should have, and it was against Kirk Cousins, and he was kind of a mess last week. I think we'll see a reversal there. I think you're going to see Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry get their numbers. Should mean good things for Zay Flowers as well.
Yeah, I think he's obviously coming back from a hamstring injury that's kept him out longer than we were hoping it would. So I think the 2 concerns would be, does he just try to play a game as a pocket passer to make sure he doesn't re-aggravate that? He's probably still okay against the Dolphins, although they've been much worse against the run. And then the second would be he takes off running. Does the hamstring hold up? You're starting Lamar Jackson, but those are the little things that might keep you up. Well, I guess they won't keep you up because we're not sleeping again until the playoffs.
Some people might go to sleep before the game happens. We'll see. But in any event, we got another quarterback coming back that you see at the bottom of that list, and that's Jayden Daniels. And so when we talk about some of the toughest players to rank, as we typically do on the show, Heath, that's the guy for you. So Daniels missed last week's game with a hamstring injury also. I don't think a lot of people expected him to return this quickly, but here he is. He's back. It's not an easy matchup, though, against Seattle.
No, I think we've got like 2 completely different universes. One where you have Jayden Daniels, a guy we all had ranked at least as high as QB4 coming into the season, and you just always start him, was kind of what we thought we were drafting with Jayden Daniels. 2, you get a guy coming back from injury without his number 1 wide receiver, facing one of the best defenses in the NFL. You don't ever start that guy. And so 12 probably makes sense. 12 is where I have Jayden Daniels. It's a little bit of a coward's play, but it's an elite quarterback in terms of both passing and rushing without one of his best weapons against a great defense.
There are a lot of quarterbacks this week that have a safe floor. Let's call it 18 fantasy points.
Yep.
I don't know how many of them have the same type of ceiling that Jayden Daniels has. And Heath's right, not having Terry McLaurin, that's a problem. I think Deebo Samuel hasn't looked good the past couple of weeks either. That's a factor. So that makes me nervous, but we know that Jayden Daniels is capable of running. I do think this is going to be a play from behind type situation. I have bet against the Seattle defense before, and I've gotten burned by it. I don't know if I want to do it this time, which is why, like Heath, I'm ranking him as a low-end QB1, but he has more upside than a lot of the other quarterbacks like Darnold, Jordan Love. It sounds a little silly, but it's true. The other quarterbacks have that safe floor, but I worry about their ceiling this week. I think Daniel's ceiling is a little bit more in play.
We'll talk about Darnold in a second, but Dave, for you, Kyler Murray's someone you're a little bit
nervous about.
Having a tough time ranking, which is surprising.
The matchup is elite, but Murray has been anything but elite over the course of the season. He's bottom 5 among qualifiers in yards per attempt, bottom 10 in touchdown rate, deep ball rate, success rate. Plus, this offense averaged 5 more points per game with Jacoby Brissett than it has this season with Kyler Murray. So I'm a little bit nervous about Murray and the Cardinals. I'm not worried at all about the matchup. This Cowboys defense stinks. So Kyler's going to have to come to play. He's motivated. He's a Texas kid coming back to play in Dallas. He's played 9 games in his life at AT&T Stadium. High school, college, pros. He's never lost. So I think he's going to be motivated to do well. It's just a matter of, will he be as good? This is going to sound silly. Is he going to be as good as Jacoby Brissett? Or is he going to be how he's kind of been this year, which is okay, around 20 fantasy points most weeks? Just going to have to wait and see.
He's actually only been over 20 fantasy points twice in 5 starts, which is disappointing, and I understand why I think some people might be concerned. The counter to that, though, is obviously the Cowboys. Every quarterback against them, 23 or more fantasy points. So hopefully Murray follows suit and has what would be his best game to date if he does hit that mark. He's a quarterback start for me. Let's talk Sam Darnold, which is the toughest guy for me to rank, and it's the guy that you want to sit this week, Heath. I love the setup for Darnold. I mean, the Commanders are terrible in terms of what they've allowed to opposing passing games this season and opposing quarterbacks. And this has kind of been the setup for Darnold, right? Because we saw it prior to the Texans game, the 2 games that he had previously to that. Jacksonville was one. Over 24 fantasy points in both of those games. Can he do that in this game? We know he has one of the best wide receivers. You know, you talked about this, Heath, the quarterback losing his wide receiver. Well, Darnold's got obviously one of the best in the business in Jackson Smith and the Jigba. Can he get to enough production with a run game that should have success, but has clearly been stagnant? So I don't mind him this week. I think you said it best. You know, a lot of quarterbacks have a pretty safe floor. I would kind of put his above the 18-point threshold. I'd probably put him around 20.
Sure.
But I know, Heath, you're a little bit concerned about Darnold.
And it doesn't have anything to do with really the way he's playing football. He's played football fantastic. It's just he does absolutely nothing with his legs. 3 rushing yards in his last 3 games. And he often throws less than 30 passes. And it's really, really hard to consistently score more than 20 fantasy points when you're throwing that little and running not at all. So I just don't know that this is the situation where they have to do something different than what they want to do, which is hand the ball off more than they throw the ball. If they do that and he throws 27 passes, what you're hoping for is he gets the second touchdown, then he probably gets you right to 20 points. But if he doesn't, you might get 12 or 13.
Yeah, it's very true. I mean, he hasn't been in that number except for the Texans game, and that was one of the best defenses in football. This one, not so much. But it's interesting that you say that, though, because we could talk about a guy that you like as a start who may not throw a lot because of the matchup and also doesn't run a lot, and that's Matthew Stafford. And I would start Matthew Stafford over Sam Darnold as well. But favorable situation, you know, run game could clearly be very good here. What's the difference between Stafford and Darnold in your mind?
They might win this game 35-7, and they just did win a game 35-7, and he threw 5 touchdown passes. One of the biggest changes, I mean, Stafford, for the most part, has just been great at throwing the football his entire career. He's still great at throwing the football. He has Puka Nacua back. He has Devontae Adams as the best number 2 wide receiver maybe ever. And they completely overhauled what they do inside the 5-yard line. It's throw the ball to Devontae Adams. The past 3 years, it's been hand the ball to Kyren Williams. Now it's throw the ball to Devontae Adams. I think he has 11 targets inside the 5-yard line, more than Kyren Williams has rush attempts. So I think he is more likely to have multiple touchdown passes than Sam Darnold is. And he has 2 elite wide receivers instead of 1.
Right.
Yeah, it makes total sense.
Potential to have 4 touchdowns compared to Darnold, who, like, a great game for Darnold would be 2.
Sure. Yeah. No, I don't think anybody's starting Sam Darnold over.
Right.
It just when you were going through
your
dislikes for Sam Darnold, it didn't make some sense to make a comparison.
But some folks might have Jayden Daniels and Matthew Stafford. I don't know how you guys feel about it, but I know that, the consensus rankings do have Stafford ahead of Daniels, which we would have never thought of back in August.
No, not at all. Let's show the rankings 13 through 24 because there's a guy on there that Dave likes as a start this week, and that's Jackson Dart. And so we don't love Dart as in terms of a must-start quarterback this week, but Dave, obviously, you're a little bit higher on him in terms of consensus, but you're a little bit higher on him just based on what he can do in this matchup against San Francisco.
What else does he have to do to be a top 12 quarterback? I mean, look at what he's done since he's been a starter. 5 starts, 4 games with at least 21 fantasy points. The one game he didn't do it was 19.5 fantasy points. So he's been good for fantasy basically every single game, and he's got some upside. And you look at this Niners defense, they've got no pass rush right now. People are comfortable. C.J. Stroud had almost 26 fantasy points against them last week. They're on the road again for the 2nd week in a row. I think Dart could have a good game. He's another one of these quarterbacks, safe floor, high ceiling. I'd start him over Jayden Daniels.
I think, first off, I think 20 fantasy points makes sense, and we've talked about how deep quarterback is this week. 20 fantasy points might be QB 14. I think there's a very good chance that we have that many quarterbacks.
Could be QB 16.
Could be QB 16. Yeah, I've got a lot of quarterbacks projected for 20 fantasy points. Also, it does feel like watching the Giants, he keeps finding ways to get to 20 fantasy points. It doesn't look very much like other NFL offenses, the way that they do it. 1 week, we're going to dump it off 9 times to Cam Scadaboo, and he's going to run like a bowling ball through 17 defenders. 1 week, he's going to run for 2 touchdowns. He keeps finding different ways. I was a little concerned last week with how long he held the ball. 3.6 seconds to get rid of the football, and he saw his highest pressure rate of the season. That's a problem young quarterbacks have sometimes. He doesn't have great wide receivers who get open quick. So I'm just a little bit worried. Hopefully he gets rid of it quicker this week.
I will say this, like, yes, it's a little concerning, all the hits that he's taking. We love, obviously, the rushing because it's either been a rushing touchdown or 55 yards on the ground in all those 5 starts.
Yep.
And we might feel a little bit different about it had that 68-yard catch counted for a touchdown that Darius Slayton with the ticky-tack pass interference call. And now he has a field stretcher. So we didn't see Slayton in 2 of the first 3 starts that Dart made. First 4 starts that Dart made. Now that he's back, we have a little bit of a different offense. Plus, no Scatterboo, so he might put a little bit more on his plate. So I think to me, he's ranked consensus-wise appropriate. I would still start Jayden Daniels over him, just, again, looking at the ceiling play. So, what you were talking about earlier about not many quarterbacks have that ceiling. Mm-hmm. Dart did that against the Broncos, so, hard to argue because that's one of the toughest defenses that you could face. So it's going to be interesting to see how they do with the run game potentially changing and how Dart will operate. All right, a couple more sits that we want to get to because, Heath, you already gave us your sit as Sam Darnold. So, Dave, I'm surprised you're sitting Jared Goff, home game against a Vikings defense that's not very good.
Yeah, how much passing is he going to have to do? He had 24.8 fantasy points in Week 18 last year against the Minnesota Vikings. That was his best game against them since 2022. And another weird thing, in 3 of his past 4 years against Minnesota, Goff has struggled in the first matchup against Minnesota, and then he comes back in the second matchup, and he's better there. I think this Minnesota run defense mystifies me. 1 week they're great against Saquon Barkley. The next week they absolutely stink against Kamani Vidal. So it's really weird how they've operated. I think it's a good opportunity for Detroit to just pound the rock. And I think Jahmyr Gibbs, he's had awesome games against them. He's going to keep it going. I think there's absolutely a play for David Montgomery. A little bit worried about Jared Goff not having to do a lot. We've seen it a couple times this year. Safe floor. Worried about the ceiling if the Vikings can't keep up on the scoreboard.
Yeah, look, makes some sense. He hasn't exactly been his usual self at home. Mm-hmm. We saw that in the Cleveland game. We saw that in the Tampa Bay game as well, where he just hasn't had that home magic just yet. But I still just think anytime he's at home and the way this defense has looked for Minnesota, the run defense has been, pass defense has been awful as well. So it wouldn't surprise me if Jared Goff has one of those games, especially coming off a bye. I got to go back and check. Usually I like to see these veteran quarterbacks, what they do coming off a bye week, how Jared Goff could perform in this game. For me, I'm going to sit Bo Nix. Look, he was the start of the week last week. He's got 75 fantasy points in his last 2 games against the Giants and the Cowboys, and that was the Giants and the Cowboys. Both of those were at home. Taking on the Texans, they're just amazing. Only 2 quarterbacks over 20 fantasy points against them so far this season. So very difficult to get away from Bo Nix, but if you can do so, we've given you a bunch of quarterbacks that we like much more than Bo Nix this week. You see right around 20th for all of us. So an easy guy to sit this week if you can. All right, we're going to take a break right now. We come back and get into the running back rankings, tell you where Tyrone Tracy stacks up, where Kamani Vidal stacks up as well. That's next here on Fantasy Football Today.